We was heading north on Highway 111. It was past midnight. We'd had a hard day moving a bunch of stuff to a town called Davenport, Tennessee. Don't worry about where it's located, you're never gonna find it anyway. Ain't nobody living there but a few rednecks. We was driving up the highway, and did I mention we had a headlight out? If I failed to mention that very important detail, I need to make sure that it's included, because the headlight that we had out was the reason why the cop pulled us over. Walked up to the car and he says, "Kid, are you aware that you got a headlight out?" I says, "Well, yes, sir, we were hoping to rectify that at the earliest available moment." And he says, "Well, kid, let me see your driver's license." I says, "Well, yes, sir, officer, I have the greatest respect for the law. Here's my driver's license right here." And I hand it over to him. And he takes it, and he walks back to hang out with his cop friend back in their car. And he's back there for a long time. And I'm starting to get nervous. What are they needing my driver's license for so long for back there? Finally, after what seemed like about 17 hours, he comes back up to me. He looks in and he says, "Kid, are you aware that your license has been suspended?" I says, "Well, no, sir, officer, I was not in any way aware of that." He says, "Get out of the car." So I got out of the car. And then he says, "Go to the back of the car." And I says, "Yes, sir." And I go to the back of the car, and his cop friend is back there. They're both looking at me, and the one cop, he says to me, he says, now, kid, let me tell you what I'm going to have to do." He says, "I'm going to have to place you under arrest, and I'm going to have to take you to jail. Turn around and let me handcuff you." I says, "Now, officer, I don't suppose you only do that for the dangerous criminals?" He says, "No, kid, we got to do that for everybody. It's our policy." I says, "Well, all right, sir, as long as it's your policy." So he handcuffs my wrists together back behind my back, and then he directs me to get into the back of the cop car that they had right there waiting. Now, if you've never tried to get into the back seat of a car with your hands handcuffed behind your back, let me tell you, it's a project that requires a fair bit more coordination than I had available to me at the time. It was kind of like having to crawl underneath one of them limbo sticks that they got out onto the beach parties, where you got to bend over backward and go under the stick without making it fall off of the thing there after everybody's had a couple too many beers. Except I hadn't had any beer, and I still couldn't get in without bumping my head on that wire cage. And then I says, "Wow. Wow. leading me down the corridor to where my cell's going to be. And I'm thinking, cool, well, at least now I'm about to get a good night's sleep. It being about 2 o'clock in the morning. And they're leading me down this corridor, and there's about 3 or 4 cell doors on the corridor. And down at the end of the corridor, where it's dark, I see this cell door, and it's standing open. And I'm heading for it. I'm thinking, surely that's my cell down there at the end with the door open. And then the cop stops me and he says, "Kid, turn right. This is your new home." And I turned to my right and I looked through the cell door that he was indicating. And on the other side of that cell door was my 10 new friends that I was about to spend the night with. And they had names like Buck and Jack, Carl and Haas and Peter and Leon and Pam. I says, "Now, officer, I don't mean to call your judgment into question, but surely there's been some kind of a mistake. That's my cell down there at the end of the corridor, the one that's completely empty and with the lights on." And he says, "Kid, get in the cell." And I says, "Yes, sir. I reckon it's your policy." So then I had all kind of crazy adventures that night in the cell, and then the next morning come around and they woke me up, and I was thankful not to have been in any way sexually molested by my new friends and roommates with names like Buck, Haas, Dick, and Pam, and Peter, and Paul, and Mary. So then they led me back out the corridor to where my friend Rhonda had come back to bail me out. And there, standing there with Rhonda, was my new friend, Laura Evans, my bail bondsman. And I says, "Hey there, Laura Evans, you sure is the prettiest thing a feller ever seen after a prison term. What say we get better acquainted?" She says, "I reckon you got a sense of humor hid in there somewhere, but I ain't seen it yet." I says, "All right, what do we got to do to spring me out of this joint?" Because you see, by this time I had done picked up the lingo. So then I had to fill out all kind of paperwork, all kinds of autobiographical information for the bail bonding company, so they knew where to get a hold of me just in case I decided to cross state lines, have an escape. And then she says, "Now I want 2 references for people who can vouch for who you are." And I gave her a reference for Dan and Paula Myers. And then she says, "Now, all right, I need a second one, and this has got to be somebody that I can call on the telephone." I says, "Well, all right. Why don't you call Pam Garveling? Here's the phone number." And what do you know? She whips out a cell phone and dials the number. Right there in the jail. And she says, "Hello, is this Pam Garveling? My name's Laura Evans, and I'm considering homeschooling. My husband and I are, and I've heard about this feller, David Bird, that he's a tutor for homeschooling families, and I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about it. I hear he's pretty good." Now, I couldn't hear what was being said on the other end of the line, but it must have been kind of impressive, because Laura kept turning around and looking at me and winking, giving me a thumbs up and stuff like that. And then finally she says, "Well, thank you very much. I reckon that's it." Then she hangs up the phone and she looks at me and she says, guess I know who I'll call if I ever need a tutor. So I was officially sprung out of the joint. And then Rhonda and I drove back home. She was apologizing the whole time for getting me stuck in the jail cell. And I said, Rhonda, don't feel bad. You're not the one who suspended my driver's license. The state of North Carolina did. Well, the upshot of it all is I ended up in my own living room, in my own house, in my own neighborhood, with 45 minutes to spare before my homeschool students assembled to hear what droplets of wisdom were going to come falling out of my mouth. So I grabbed me a shower and changed clothes and got ready to share with them the story of the Walker County, the Van Buren County lockup. Just the way I done laid it out to you right now. With strings and a chorus and full 12-part harmony. Just like I just presented it to you. In fact, I'm just waiting for it to come back around on the guitar. It's the Van Buren County lockup, baby. I'm in the